In the 1880s, Europeans invaded the continent of Africa to divide among themselves. In the beginning, Italy was the first European country that claimed Ogaden Somaliland its own protectorate. After Italian defeat in the Adwa War in 1896, Britain claimed Ogaden as its possession. 1 year later, Britain ceded to Abyssinia, now known as modern-day Ethiopia. 37 years later, Italy occupied Ogaden again between 1935 and 1942. After the Italian defeat by the British in 1942, Ogaden was again controlled by the British military administration from 1942 to 1948. Finally, well after the end of World War II, Ogaden fell under the control of Abyssinian Ethiopian rule once again. The current turmoil and bloodshed in Ogaden is the consequence of a secret Anglo-Abyssinian agreement in 1897. The Ogaden comprise about 1/5 of the Ethiopian territory, ceded to Ethiopia in the late 19th century by the colonialists. The treaty permitted Menelik to expand his empire and claim that the Abyssinian Empire conquered the Ogaden territory. Nevertheless, the 1897 treaty was a complete infringement of the treaty between Somali chiefs and Britain between 1884 and 1886. From the time the British ceded Ogaden to Ethiopia to the present day, the livelihood of the people had confounded and remained downcast. The international press has been continuously disallowed from interviewing Ogaden civilians within the Ogaden territory about the ongoing brutality committed by the Ethiopian military. The following interviews are real stories of people subjected to these atrocities. I fled from the Ogaden region colonized by Ethiopia, particularly from the Fik city in the Nogab province. Ethiopia caused me a great deal of pain and suffering. You can see the physical scars and wounds on my body. I fled for a fear of my life. These at the end forced me to flee. Look at my hand. These are bullet shots by the Ethiopian military. While I did not commit any crimes to deserve these, I was an innocent civilian. I have more bullet wounds on other parts of my body. This on my back is another wound. I was an innocent civilian, a camel herder, when Ethiopia accused me of being an ONLF member and did this to me. In general, Ethiopia hates camel herders and accuses them of giving the rebels milk and support as well. The other residents at my village were massacred, abused, and tortured. Some were killed, some were imprisoned, and some, their heads were cut off by the Ethiopian soldiers. Many villages were all burned down. I am an Ogadenian civilian who lived in the Fik area of Region 5, specifically in a small village near Duhan town. In August of 2007, the Ethiopian army and the ONLF confronted in fighting somewhere not far from my village. The Ethiopian troops had inflicted heavy casualties. When they arrived in the village, they were frightfully angry and distressed. Then they turned against us. We were all civilians who neither took part in the conflict nor part of the warring sides. The Ethiopian troops, however, indiscriminately started spraying bullets in all directions, and they killed anyone in the spectacle. It was about 2 p.m. when they shot me in the head, but fortunately the bullet hit me through the side. Look at this long scar on my cheek. It is a gunshot wound, now healed. They left me as a dead body, but God helped me survive out of the Ethiopian atrocity. There were many people in the village that Ethiopian soldiers killed. I could not remember the number. The atrocities I suffered under the government of Ethiopia were uncountable. It is not something I can say consisted of such and such things. There was nothing they could do to us that they spared. I suffered the ultimate suffering. We were in a small town named Gerdumi in Dagobur province on February 15, 2009. When the Ethiopian army arrived, they started firing upon us indiscriminately and without asking any questions. It's the bullet that has done this to me. My teeth, mouth, all of this. It came in right here, went through my mouth and out here. They left me for dead. The people who were there were either killed, wounded, arrested, or fled for their lives. The dire situation that people are in is not something that can be described in words. Only those experienced it know. The people in the area later helped me survive, and then I fled the country, headed here because staying there was impossible. It was a desperate situation. I finally arrived in this refugee camp. I was issued a ration card, but I haven't received much help. I'm asking the international community in general, and the Ogaden diaspora in particular, to do what they can to help us. Here are some more stories of torture of Ogaden women in Ethiopia by Malez Zenawi's troops.
They detained and divided us into different detention locations. Soldiers who attacked us were the federal police who came from Addis Ababa. The interrogators were also from Addis Ababa. I was in the central prison in Chigchiga with many other women. We had suffered continuous torture, rape, and strangulation. Soldiers put blankets on prisoners' heads with hot pepper chili smoke and rubbed it into their eyes. In some situations, they forced prisoners to drink salt water. They tied our legs with large wooden bars with heads down like bats. They used to throw us in water pools and suffocate us with plastic bags. They tortured men in shocking and inhumane methods. Soldiers tortured men in prison by tying their testicles with 10-liter containers filled with soil or water, then forced them to stand up with it. Some people in prison got electric shock torture. Others had their feet and arms tied back for weeks. For me, the soldiers had tied my arms back for 18 days. Look at these scars on my neck. This is wire strangulation. Look at this one on my leg. It is from a rifle bayonet. They were trying to rape me, and while resisting, they stabbed me with their gun bayonet on my thigh. There are many scars on my covered body parts that I cannot show people. They used to take off our clothes forcefully, and while naked, telling us to face out towards the wall. Then they'd start beating us with large wooden sticks, guns, and iron bars on the back. Some of us died, and others did not come back to their homes and are still missing. Immediately after I got released, I left by foot and sneaked out of town. I went to Hargeisa in Somaliland. A few weeks later, distant relatives of mine helped me out and brought my children to Hargeisa, whereas we reunited again. Though we were hundreds of miles away from the enemy, we felt unsafe in the Somaliland because they had local spies in there. I decided to save for my life and my children. We fled to Kenya, where we are now. We were more than 100 members of the Maktal family, and few of us had survived. The rest are still missing, and I do not know where they are at. I cannot forget such an ordeal that I have experienced. The Ethiopian government has shown us no mercy and left us nothing at all but destruction.
Checking whether the crime in Ogaden is genocide or not. Is not food and commercial blockade a crystal clear genocide? Is not silencing NGOs, human rights organizations, and media an act of crime against humanity? Is not absolute mass murder genocide? Is not torture and wire strangulation to death crime or genocide? Is not mass detention without due process genocide? Is not raping women and young girls genocide? Is not earth-scorching, looting, and destroying property genocide? Is not displacing people out of their homes genocide? If not, what else can be called genocide? The answer is yes, these are genocide acts against humanity. Thus, there is no doubt that these are acts of crime of genocide against humanity. Accordingly, the crime perpetrated by the Ethiopian military and allied local militia against Ogaden Somali civilians is an ignored genocide indeed.